It is 6:30 on December 5th, 2023, and I will call the Select Board of Wenham to order. In attendance is myself, Diane Bucco. We'll go this way.
Ben Timon.
Deirdre Parati.
Peter Clay. Gary Cheeseman.
And T.A. Steve Poulos and Michelle McGovern is here as well. So we always start today with public input. We reserve 10 minutes for public input. If any participants are in the house, which they're not. Scott, you're not here for public input, right?
No, just early.
Just early. Thank you for coming. There are people on Zoom land. It looks like Tom Starr has his hand up. Tom, if you could just recognize yourself and your address.
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay.
Tom Starr, 41 Pleasant Street.
Yes.
Yeah, so I just wanted to speak to the Pleasant Pond issue. I just wanted to say that Pleasant Pond has been a tremendous asset to us living and raising a child in Wenham. And, we feel that it would be, really a shame for it to not continue to operate the way it has all these past decade or so with lifeguards and we feel that the cost savings, if it's being done for cost savings, is quite minimal compared to the overall town budget, even though I certainly appreciate the effort to save money wherever possible. But it does seem like the return for that small investment is very big for the community. It's a tremendous asset.
Great. Thank you very much, Tom.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know if I see any other hands. Is there anyone else there that would like to speak? Regina?
I'm just going to take my opportunity to speak on open comment. I know I
Regina,
had a conversation before, but I want
Regina?
to reflect the same as
Regina?
Tom Starr and many other residents. I believe that some letters were sent regarding Pleasant Pond and the safety and the monitoring and the necessity to have the fact that there is some staffing. It doesn't necessarily have to be lifeguards, but the fact that there is a staff in place has been proven for the past 23 years, and then before then. But in my time of involvement in this pond, that without staffing, and when the word gets out, it leads to unsafe, it led to a death, it leads to neglect, it leads to the ruin of a beautiful recreation area and an unsafe atmosphere for families to attend. It has been a recreational area for all generations, and the newer generations that have come in since the initial time that the town had decided to not staff the pond, and the newer people didn't know how it was before. And I think that if you try to not staff it again, it's just going to repeat history. I know it will, but I just want to state my facts that I know and my involvement in the pond and take the opportunity on the public comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Regina. Can you give us your address, please?
2 South Street, Wenham.
Great. Thank you so much. Is there anybody else?
I think so.
Out there in Zoom land? Okay. I don't see any. We do have Pleasant Pond later on the agenda, so we'll talk about it at that point. Town Administrator's update and town announcements. Sir, wait a minute.
Madam Chair. So I'm happy to announce that we have finally been able to acquire an AED for the town hall. So that's the, I think, a defibrillator device. It is located in the copy room right here in the hallway. And we have set up CPR and AED training for all staff and boards and committees. That will be held on January 9th at the fire station from 3 to 7. That's a Tuesday night that the board doesn't have a meeting. Further, we're working towards putting in quarterly staff training for boards, committees, and staff. And the two currently being scheduled for later this year is for the third and fourth quarter of the year is harassment training, and prior to town meeting would be all you wanted to know about town meeting, but we're afraid to ask. So I'm not sure if anybody remembers that movie. I had to show Joe. He's a little young.
He's a little bit younger. What about the January? Don't we have
Drinking the woolite.
don't we have Lauren Colbert coming for open meeting law?
Yep, and Lauren Goldberg coming for open meeting law, but that's additional, and that's Diane's. I didn't want to steal your thunder on that.
I don't know, as long as it's still good.
Yeah. So we met with Dodson and Flinker on, and they presented us with a draft from the consultants. So the way the scope was drafted is they were going to do some public outreach like they did. They were kind of going to come up with several scenarios based on that public outreach, which they did in this draft. And then the town was essentially going to be asked, the decision makers, to, make a decision of one or two, and then they would build those out in more detail. So I'm going to forward this around tomorrow. I'm going to forward the draft around to the Board of Selectmen and the Iron Rail Committee tomorrow. And my email will basically, I figure it's easier just to talk a little bit about it now, is that we'll be looking for feedback from you, both from the perspective of, what you like about the report just in general, what you don't like, things you would like to see be changed, thoughts, initial reactions on the proposed projects, just things like that, as we're trying to, the consultants are looking for constructive feedback. And also, and I've had this conversation with Deirdre a number of times, is we're working to try to come up with a financial, kind of like a current and existing conditions of the financial impact to the town that the iron rail has. And one, what revenue does it bring in, and what type of money would we have to spend to get it fixed up? So to do that appropriately and with any accuracy, would need to hire some sort of architect or structural engineer that's familiar with costing this type of project, because after touring the property just a week or two ago with our building inspector, it seems to be that would pretty quickly exceed. There's a $500,000 exemption for maintenance you can do maintenance up to $500,000 and not trigger ADA compliance. So it seems like we would pretty quickly exceed that $500,000, and with that you would trigger, pretty much full ADA compliance, which would include an elevator, reworking of the entryways and how you can navigate the building. And, that is beyond our ability to calculate, that cost with any accuracy. So again, I want you to when you're reading it, to be thinking about, how detailed do we want to get? And this can come back in another discussion, but it's just things to think about. How detailed do we want to get from a revenue expense side? We've tossed around the idea of having an appraisal done of the property as it sits. So just to give some context to people reading the report, we have this asset. If we were to, maybe spin off the cemetery and the DPW and kind of sell it to a developer with, historic restrictions, whatever type of, how much money, are we, what is this asset worth, and what is it costing us, and what will it cost us to continue operating, eventually, just essentially the way we are, with a doggy daycare and a gymnastics in there, if we're going to do the maintenance that the building needs, because it hasn't been touched in a long time. A reminder, again, budget meetings the 16th, so that's not this Saturday, it's the following Saturday, 8 to noon. We're really trying to make sure everybody's out by noontime, so anybody who wants to can attend the REITs across America. Sean McCarthy resigned from his position at the DPW and has taken a full-time position or accepted a position, will be appointed. We may have to have a special meeting for it so we can start next week, but will be appointed to the fire department full-time. So I guess this has been an interest of his for a long time. We're happy to see it worked out. He's a good guy, and he's a hard worker. And I know the fire department's excited to have somebody, kind of with his existing knowledge, skill set, and work ethic. CPC, we've been working in not negotiations, but discussions about potentially creating a part-time CPC admin assistant. So this would be no additional cost to the town itself. It would be fully funded by CPC funds, because as they're kind of the leadership of the committee has shifted over the last couple of years, they're really looking to do a lot of public outreach, annual reporting, have an interactive website that's routinely updated, and it's kind of their needs are quickly outgrowing our capacity to support them in the way we have in the past. So they are receptive to that idea. It's not uncommon to see towns do that, and this individual would work directly for the committee. All costs would be picked up by the committee, as well as it would give us the opportunity to kind of relook at how we're currently accounting for CPC costs and kind of move any appropriate legal fees and whatnot that have been currently just being picked up by the tax base that should have probably have been picked up with CPC funds from the beginning. One more thing. So we went through the procurement process. Part of our capital plan last year was to start addressing some of the issues with the building envelope on the police station. So we went out to bid for repair of the rotted woodwork, with replacing it with the Aztec, fake wood board, and painting of the building. And we got 9 bids, and we ended up going with Northeast Paint. They were the lowest bid at $16,587, spot 91. So their plan is to start in the spring. And that's all I have for you tonight.
Wow. Gary, you have anything?
Yes. So this past Saturday, there was the Toys for Tots fundraiser by the police and fire departments. So I need to say thank you to Sergeant Michael Mizis, Officer Matt Kerkorian, Officer Wesley Isadora, and Officer Brian Pratt from the police department. And from the fire department, Chief Kavanaugh, Deputy Chief Baxter, Deputy Chief Sullivan, Captain Joyce, Lieutenant Nickus, firefighter Michael Burke, EMT Charles Hoffman, and you may, if you had stopped by, you might have caught a glimpse of the Grinch and St. Nicholas, and we'd have to say thank you to firefighter Elise Samimo and firefighter Sean Bresnahan for those roles. And just a challenge, so the fire department still has an empty box out there, so between now and Friday at 5 p.m., anybody in town can drop off Toys for Tots at the fire station from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. so we can fill that last box.
Got it. It's supposed to be unwrapped toys, right?
Unwrapped toys, yes. New.
I'm clean.
Nothing today? Deirdre?
Yes, I'd like to acknowledge the passing of a longtime Wenham resident. Harriet Elaine Hardy passed away on November 22nd, 2023. She was the loving wife of the late Wilbur Hardy, with whom she shared an amazing 72 years of marriage before his passing. Born in Beverly, Elaine graduated in 1941 from Briscoe High School in Beverly and worked at the GE plant until she married Wilbur and settled into their home in Wenham. Elaine was devoted to family and friends and created a warm and loving environment around her. She was active in a number of charitable and church activities and a longtime member of the Christian Women's Club. Elaine is survived by her daughter, who is our very own exceptional recording secretary, Catherine Tinsley, as well as 4 children and 5 great-grandchildren. Elaine was a true Wenham treasure and Wenham's oldest resident, living to the incredible age of 101. A celebration of life will be held in Beverly on December 15th. And just on behalf of the board, our condolences to her family and respect for an incredible, long, wonderful life.
That's great. Thank you for that. Very nice. Anything today?
The only thing I have to say is just to add a personal note relating to, relating to Elaine Hardy. She was my next door neighbor for 20 years, and when we moved to, to Wenham in 2003, she and her husband Will Hardy were extremely welcoming neighbors and welcoming us to the town of Wenham, and we couldn't have asked for really more dear neighbors than the Hardys. Will passed away a few years ago, and Elaine was just a tremendous person, as Deirdre read, and she'll be missed.
Yeah, I bet. Thank you very much. I still don't have any information on Lucy Fredrickson, who also recently passed about the same time, but we will update everybody, and of course we send our condolences to their family as well. So I had questions for you on your announcements. Thank you very much. The staff trainings, do we have dates on those?
No, not yet.
So that's staff, boards, committees, everybody, right?
Yep.
Okay, so that would be nice if we could get those out.
I thought that January 10th, that
Is
the
the
date for the
open meeting law?
CPR.
Yeah, the first one, the AED training we have. The other two are,
Oh,
we're hammering out the dates now. We selected those two, and then we're just working with the attorneys that'll be presenting them. It's through KP Law.
It is through KP Law. We have a date for the open meeting law in January, but I don't remember what it is.
Yeah, it's in the teens, so.
It's in the teens, so it's not the same, it's not the same as the 9th, I
No,
hope.
it's not.
I think that's great. Thank you very much for taking that
Yeah,
on.
it's been a long, it's, like anything, it takes a while to get things now, and
Right. But the nice spread out trainings, not mandatory, but always good for people to go to those things. That's great.
Oh, we can get on there, it's fine.
I guess that really was my only question, and I don't have anything else, so I think we can move on. 7 o'clock? Oh, we don't have everyone yet, so we will wait on the FinCom and move down to the discussion and potential vote to approve the use of the Affordable Housing Trust funds to allow the Affordable Housing Trust to enter into a purchase and sale agreement with the owner to ultimately purchase the unit at 2A Dexter Lane for an amount not to exceed $220,000. I believe we heard from Huntley before, and we have the contract now.
yeah, so what this proposal is, and Gary, feel free to hop in, fill in any holes that I'm missing, but essentially the Affordable Housing Trust wants to purchase this 2A Dexter Lane. It's an affordable housing home, and it was on the verge of being foreclosed upon, and we're negotiating with the bank to purchase it and to be able to keep it in our affordable housing stock. So as in the past, for the Affordable Housing Trust to spend the money, they need the approval by the Select Board. So this is them asking for your approval to spend up to $220,000 to purchase 2A Dexter Lane.
Do we have any questions, comments? Gary?
I can just add, being on the Affordable Housing Trust, that this is a great deal all around, that the current occupant will get out from a mortgage and believe has a slot over at the new Maplewoods. The town will purchase the property at a discount because it is currently under affordability, but if it went to foreclosure, we would lose it off the affordability list. And so I think we've covered all the bases. It's been quite a long, drawn-out process, still working with the bank, but I think all the other ends are together, and the 220 is, hopefully a little bit higher than what we'll finally pay for it, but we wanted just to come to the Select Board one time.
Anybody else? Do we want to vote?
I move to approve the use of Affordable Housing Trust funds to allow the AHT to enter into a purchase and sale agreement with the owner to ultimately purchase the unit at 2A Dexter Lane for an amount not to exceed $220,000.
Second?
No further discussion, we can vote.
Yes.
Deirdre, yes?
Peter, yes.
Gary, yes.
Diane, yes, it's a unanimous vote for that. I think that's a win-win all the way around. Thank you. Flying through this, let's go down to D. An appointment to the Zoning Board of Appeals for an associate member. We have a very informative and great letter from Ken Whitaker, who is not with us today, but has an unbelievable little letter of interest. So the ZBA does not need members. They're fully staffed, but they don't have any associate members. Is that the case?
Sorry, what was that? I was reading the notes.
The ZBA is fully, they have all their members, but they
Yes.
just in need for associates in the event that someone can't make a meeting or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, and it's been useful to have them in the past.
Perfect.
Relied upon them.
Any questions, comments, discussion?
Alrighty,
Oh, did you have something?
I move to appoint
Wait.
Ken, sorry.
Sorry, I was just gonna comment to say, I mean, I think we're all gonna be unanimously approving this, but I think many of us have known Ken Whitaker for a long time. I've known Ken for a long time in different capacities, and he's exceedingly qualified for this position, and will be a great asset to the ZBA.
That's great. Looking forward to having him back.
I move to appoint Kenneth F. Whittaker, jeez, as an associate member to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a term beginning December 5th, 2023 and ending June 30th, 2026.
Second?
Diane votes yes.
Ben, yes.
Deirdre, yes?
Peter, yes.
Gary, yes.
It's a unanimous vote. Thank you very much, Ken. Let's do the minutes. Open space. Open session, we have 2 sets of minutes. I have some edits, but does anyone else have anything to say? Let's look at the first set, October 24th. Anybody have anything on that one?
Nope.
I'd just like to say that in 3B, my name has 2 N's. Very neurotic about that. And also, on 5C and D, is that not all the same? Am I missing why there's a C and a D?
Yes, well, that was from the original agenda, and reviewing the video, in fact, you mentioned C, we did the work, but D was still on the agenda and was just put in by the contractor to fill in that agenda item.
Okay, so there's no problem there?
No.
So before we go to the vote, November 7th, does anyone have any comments on the minutes? Gary?
After the vote, if we could have just 1 minute and talk about future minutes?
Yes, definitely.
Yep.
So I see then in 3B, the first line, Deirdre Parady thanked the chief. We want to make sure that it says fire chief as opposed to police chief. And then further down in that paragraph, 1, 2, 3, 4 lines up, it says the same thing twice. War memorial followed by lunch at the fire station at 12 p.m. The second time it's written can be struck.
Oh, November 7th. Oh, sorry.
Yes. And my other question is, don't really know what happened on 5, after 5B until 5C. I'm confused on where that came from.
Are you talking the contract terms for Chief DiNapoli?
Nope. On page 2, new business 5B, we had an appointment, and then it, with no letter, TA to approve update on goals and objectives. That I don't know why it's there. It should be C, but there's another C.
All right, we'll check the numbering.
Something, I don't know what it was. Just kind of confusing to me. Those were my two things. So I guess I would wait to discuss November 7th until someone can figure out what that is. Is that all right? All right. That happens. That happens. So let's vote about on 1024.
I move that we accept the minutes of open session 10/24/2023
As amended.
as amended. Second.
Diane, yes?
Ben, yes.
Deirdre, yes?
Peter, yes? Gary, yes.
Perfect. So let's hold 11-7 and maybe someone can, okay. 11-7 until we can figure out what those two sections are. Thank you. You had a question or you wanted to make a comment on minutes?
The minutes, as you know, we're using a contractor to do them. We found that there's additional workload that's incurred once the minutes come back to us. So we're talking today that we may move or suggest to move to a setup where we use a transcription service that will just provide us the printout of everything said in the minute, and then we'll delete out from that rather than having to get the minutes back from the contractor and then have to go through the video again to see if it matches up. So I think that it'll save us quite a bit of money as well if we move to the transcription, and probably will be available to all the other committees as well, hopefully.
So you mean through the Zoom? I know Zoom has a transcription.
Yes,
AI
yeah,
that just,
yeah.
or whatever, it's like closed captioning.
Right.
So it takes everything, which we don't need everything, but then someone
But
would
then
need to,
the clerk for each committee can just essentially cut out the surplus.
I think it's included in the subscription,
It is. I don't mean to interrupt, but I've used it with
please do.
HTC, and I found it to be quite accurate. It literally, word by word, will transcribe, and then, like Gary was saying, you can kind of tweak or take out the words you want, and it actually downloads right into your computer too after the meeting. So
I think we should try it. Should we have a vote to try it, or can we just try it?
I think we'll just try it.
So
We're
just
not
try
gonna
it.
just abandon the other one altogether, right?
No, I don't think we should do that either. Yeah, so,
We'll see, we'll run a
We'll
couple.
go parallel.
yeah.
We'll see how we like, maybe we'll try it. I think there's
Okay.
a million AI products out there that, are minimal cost and,
Well, Zoom would be free.
yeah, I think even the Zoom minute taker has some associated fee to it.
Oh.
So there's,
Okay.
we'll test a couple before
Perfect.
we just walk away from what we're currently
Yep.
doing.
Sounds good. Heard of that. It's 7 o'clock, almost 7 o'clock. So we don't have time to start with C right now. We'll come back to that. We don't have time to do E right now. We're not doing F.
there's a hand up, so you know.
There's a hand up. Michelle Bailey, do you have something to add?
I just had my hand up because I saw on the FinCom's agenda at 7 o'clock, they had public comment.
Okay, they haven't called themselves to order yet. It's just still
Right.
6:58. We're not all here yet.
Yep.
Thank you. All right. I don't think we have time much to do anything. We can just take a little breather. We can just wait till 7? Just wait till 7.
Guys, are we in person or is someone joining us by Zoom?
Dano is on.
Dano's on Zoom.
Dan,
Okay.
so, yeah, so you got the quorum.
Okay. Are you expecting anybody else?
Jeff is not going to be in attendance.
Okay.
I don't know about David.
What was this? This? Yep.
Rewriting it.
Oh, all right, I was like, it
No
kinda
way you'd
says
be
it's-
able to reread
It's
that.
after I read one, I could read the other. All right, so it's 7 o'clock. If the FinCom wants to call themselves to order, please.
Call this meeting of the Wenham Finance Committee to order at 7 o'clock. Present are Scott Schoenberger.
This is Finn Sprague.
And virtually, Dano, are you there?
I have to bring him over
Can you open Dano up?
Yeah, I think I have to bring him over to a panelist. I got him.
Dano, we're going to get you in a second.
Okay. Can you hear us, Dano? Thanks.
Greetings, Danos here. Sorry to be virtual.
Better virtual than not.
Thanks.
Thank you. Does the FinCom have public comment on their agenda?
Michelle Bailey's hand is still raised. I don't know if she just didn't, she wants to say another.
I'm asking a question, though. Does the FinCom agenda have public comment?
I'm going to pull up the agenda.
Yeah, I don't have
Thank
it
you.
in front of me.
I believe it does.
But yeah, no,
Okay. I'm going to let you guys do your public comment then.
so we'll have a public comment period not to exceed 10 minutes. Are there any hands raised?
There is.
We have to see the Zoom again.
Hi, Michelle. Can you hear us?
There's no hand raised.
Okay.
My hand is raised. It's been raised since before 7 o'clock.
Go ahead.
Hi. So tonight, the Board of Selectmen and the FinCom are meeting. One of your item agendas is to look at the alternatives for Pleasant Pond. And as you do that, I want you to consider what the value of Pleasant Pond is. You'll note that you're being asked to eliminate the jobs that are held there. Those jobs are generally held by teenagers. When my children were growing up, there were lots of jobs for 14, 15, 16, and 17-year-olds because about 35 students were, or 35 children were hired at the Wenham playground program. And then, maybe a dozen or so down at the pond. Those jobs go away. We don't really have places that have replaced for teenagers to work. Many cities, Boston, the like, they will have programs to hire teenagers to give them something to do for the summer. For $20,000, I think we're looking at a great opportunity for kids to have jobs. It also provides safety. My own children have worked at the pond. Their job is to monitor what's going on there. They have to ask the fishermen not to fish from the beach. They have to ask people not to let their dogs pee and poop on the beach. They clean the beach. They clean the weeds. They make sure that the people who come in have their stickers. I understand you would have police officers patrolling, but I cannot see the police officers coming in and being there every time there's a dog, being there every time there's a fisherman on the beach, being there all the time. So I'd really ask you to consider what is the value of those $20,000, because I think it's a lot greater than you may think, and that we cannot solve Wenham's budget issues $20,000 at a time. There just aren't enough $20,000 that we can cut. So I would ask you to consider what the value is of having those jobs for those kids and keeping that area safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
All righty. So are you on? Or do they have other stuff to do?
I think that was all.
Thank you.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the second annual, how do we call it, finance overview. Yeah, I got this. Oh, no, it's not doing.
Oh,
There
yep.
we go. All right. So really, what this presentation is it's supposed to be a high-level look at kind of our financial picture, our sources of revenue, our expenditures, pressure points that we have on the budget, as well as our reserves, debt service, and free cash. It'll talk about some industry best practices and then also identify some areas for improvement and things that we're doing well. I think a common theme, well, a new theme that we're trying to implement now as we go through our presentations, both firstly this one and then the budget presentations on the 16th, is to, try to build awareness and communicate why your local government exists and what we do. So trying to, budget hearing is about the money, but we also want to be able to illustrate what services are tied to those dollars, so it doesn't just become all about, why did postage go up $50 from, this year to last year, and kind of contextualize, what the postage is needed for and, what service it's tied to. So I'll just start first with, why do we exist? This is a definition I've seen used. I've always kind of been fond of it. It's just because it's very simple. Some of the, if you Google what's a municipal government, you can get, paragraphs of what it is and what makes it up. But I thought this kind of reduced it. And I'll read it. It's a municipality is a corporate and political entity organized by the residents of an area to operate within a prescribed geographic area, and I underline this, for the purpose of providing public services. So, and that's what we're looking to define as we, move through this process. So what I did here was I tried to identify the different areas of government as they currently exist in Wenham. So, education, public works. So, I mean, with education, we educate, I think, about 600 Wenham students through the Essex Tech and the Hamilton-Wenham Regional District. Public Works, right? So you got your clean drinking water, keeps your roads cleared, repaired, ADA compliance, accessibility to the buildings, facilities maintenance. We have a number of buildings that we need to maintain. Grounds maintenance, so you got all your parks, recreational areas, lawns, public open space that are mowed, trash cleaned, kept in usable condition for the residents. Yeah, snow removal, your street lighting when you're driving around, land use control. So without planning, conservation engineering, and zoning enforcement, you'd have uncontrolled development with no, rhyme or reason as to what's going on. So those keep your neighborhoods homogeneous, similar, pleasing to the eye. Health and Human Services, we have a number of these with your library, your health department, cemetery, council on aging, affordable housing, veteran services that service the the veteran subset of the community, and also recreation activities. And last but not least, you have public safety, so that when you dial 911 and you need someone to come for a med call, that they're running the ambulance out there. Police are out there keeping the streets safe. Code enforcement, so Rich, the building inspector, is making sure that the builders are building the homes to current building codes to make sure they're safe and efficient. So when you're buying a house in town, that that the building is up to code or code at the time and is safe and fit to live in. And animal control, which is filled by our police chief. So, a number of services, and I think that what we're going to try to do a little bit at the budget hearing is to add some metrics to that and kind of quantify, how many miles or feet of road were paved, how many ADA ramps were put in, how many Meals on Wheels did the COA deliver, how many seniors did they assist with getting Medicare or supplemental, so really kind of put some numbers to that. So this year I'm going to spend a little bit of extra time on revenue sources, primarily the tax levy, because of kind of all the noise we've been hearing out of the assessor's office, or really just with the assessments and what's going on and what does it mean when my house goes up in value. I hear a lot that, you know, in my office anyways, what is the town doing with all the extra money that we're getting from raising, you know, residents' values? And I'm hoping that the next few slides will kind of clarify that it, you know, long and short of it is it doesn't equate to any extra money for the town. But so we have really three primary revenue sources. It's you got your tax levy, which is the biggest, local receipts and state aid. And I just, as we go through these slides, I just want you to, really the takeaway is that really more than 90% of our revenue comes from our tax dollars. Less than 10% comes from everything else. And they're all very stable, but their growth is extremely limited, and our largest revenue source highly constrained by Proposition 2.5, which is Mass General Law. So first we have the you know, property tax. So this is just to note. So when you're looking at how much money we raise every year, that's your property tax levy limit, and that is limited by 2.5% plus new growth every year, no matter what. So what your levy limit is in the prior year, it's just, you know, pretty much exactly how much money you're gonna have to spend the next year, just by simply multiplying that by 2.5, and the other small variable is your new growth number, which Wenham historically has conservatively estimated, although it wasn't that conservative a number of years ago, but has now been relatively conservative at $150,000, and that's 90% of our revenue. There's really no mystery around it. And the mechanisms built into Proposition 2.5 to essentially circumvent that is it allows the governing body to elect to do what is called either a debt exclusion, so you can exclude the debt service on things like large capital purchases or maintenance items, and those extra payments are raised through taxation and tied to the payments on that debt issue. So as the payments taper off and go away, so does that debt exclusion and the extra tax, kind of a below the line adjustment here. And override, similarly as the debt exclusion, however, they're a permanent increase in your tax levy is, what's going on here? Did I do that? And is what the override is. And the debt exclusion does not grow at 2.5%. However, a operational override is built into your tax levy and will grow at the 2.5%. See if that, you want to just go to the next slide? I don't know why this isn't working. So this is kind of an example I tried to put together. Hopefully, maybe we'll put it on the website, share it when people are wondering, you know, how we come up with a tax rate. And it's really as simple as, you know, if the town budget, all things remaining constant, is $100, so that's our tax levy. Ours is about 20-something million, but for simplicity, our tax levy is $100, and we have four residents in the town in this example, and all the properties, their assessed values add together. So here's their assessed values. They add together. The whole town's worth $2,000. This town wants to spend $100 with it, and their value is $200. It's just simple. Your budget need, so our tax levy divided by the total town's worth, is your rate, and it's as simple as that. And you multiply your rate times your assessment, and you get how much your taxes are going to be for the year. Next slide. And here I just want, so in this situation here, I hypothetically said, you know, to try to mimic what a big increase would be in a market fluctuation. If, you know, the bridge was built out to the island, and now you don't have to rely by boat to get your supplies out there, all the homes are now worth twice as much. So in this, I use this example, you know, when we could take the town of Wenham and multiply everyone's assessment by 2. And this is just to show that, if you see property A of the 4 residents, all these property values doubled. Again, our tax levy can't change because it's constrained by Proposition 2.5. It's still $100. The tax rate just gets cut in half. Multiply that doubled, your double value times your tax rate, the tax rate that got cut in half. You're still the original scenario. You're still raising the $100 and everybody's still paying the same amount of money. So, and this one is one that, we have some pockets in town that have been undervalued for some time, and some data has been, has recently come available due to the increase in sales that we've been having. And these pockets of town are seeing increases disproportionate to the average increase across the entire town. So what's happening within our the tax assessment and the levy, again, Proposition 2.5 restricts us from raising. We can only raise $100, right? But our property value will increase because, we have parcel A. Parcel A doubled in value. So let's say, neighborhood A, you could think neighborhood A doubled in value. So now the rate will come down because the total value of the town went up, all things remaining constant, and now the rate is reflective of that. When you can see is the internal shift of the tax burden across the residents. So the $1,000 one paid a little less than what it would have if it was stayed at 50, but it doubled, so it still went up to 40. It didn't double in taxes, but it doubled in value. And you'll see how the shift now disproportionately moved onto their property and relieved the rest of the residents. That's as the tax base moves, that's how the assessments are moving within the residents. So you can then, next slide. Basically, you just take those concepts and you apply it to a town like Wenham with 1,000, 2,000 parcels. It's the same thing. You always got pieces of the pie that's a tax burden that's growing and changing. Next slide. Well, I guess I'll stop there. Is there any questions? Or is everyone asleep? No? All right.
I understand. I understand what you're saying. That's unusual.
All right, so moving on. So basically what this is, the next couple slides are some benchmarks on revenue sources and property taxes. This is just to show that we're in the same boat with not only our peer communities in the North Shore, but pretty much any community similar to our size or even much greater. Danvers, for example, is not a peer community because it's about 30,000 people, but their revenue structure is very similar to ours. It's about maybe 88% tax, and the rest is others. So we're not alone in that. Next slide. The new growth, as we talked about before, would be the additions of buildings. That's the additional beyond the 2.5%. Wenham, it does pretty well in this benchmark compared to our peer communities. However, I think we're going to see over the next couple years or even year or two us fall back in line to the middle of the pack. I think what we're seeing here is the new assessing office with the shared agreement is much more active in collecting growth. So going out and closing building permits that may have been taken out 5, 6, 7 years ago and were never inspected. So they're out there collecting those additions, things that haven't been updated in some time. And it's reflective in our growth numbers. So we're going to see, and I believe that we'll see the spike. Last year it started. Again, we're seeing it again this year. Similarly, about 350,000. Last year was 380. And we'll probably see it again next year. And then I think we're going to see it kind of taper back and fall back in line with where we usually are, about 1%, 1 to 1.5%. And so this is really I won't spend much time because it's really just this is about 9-10% of our total revenue sources, state aid. So this is something that's in the governor's budget. This is local aid. You'll see it's called unrestricted general government aid, and this is separate from Chapter 70 funding. So when you talk about, you see a lot of talk when you watch the news. Well, not a lot, but they don't really talk about general government aid. They talk mostly about school aid. So in a non-regionalized school district, this would come over essentially all as one payment. So when you're looking at, if you took a community with a non-regional school district, you'd see something typical to Wenham. You'd see something closer to like 10% school state aid. So that skews the numbers a little bit, but the reality of it is the large majority of it, in this case probably about 8%, is restricted school spending. So in this case, because we have a regional school district, our 10% of our total expenditures, 8% of that goes directly to the schools, and we realize 2% of it unrestricted. And then the rest is local receipts, and that's mostly excise tax and permitting fees, with excise tax being about $600,000 or $700,000, and permitting fees, I believe, came in about $350,000 last year. And then just a little note on this is, although over time the gross amounts appear to be trending upwards slightly, as a percentage of total expenditures, it is decreasing and becoming less of a percentage of our total operating budget.
Steve, I think there's a question.
Yep.
Sorry, the last bullet point there, large communities are 50 to 60%. Can you explain that?
Yep. So think communities like gateway communities like the Lynn, Lawrence, Lowell are probably the highest in the state. New Bedford, those communities with certain income demographics and diversity have significant contributions made to their school aid. So they'll have, for example, I worked with the finance director in Lowell, and pretty much their entire school budget was paid for by state aid. So about 60% of their budget didn't have to be raised by taxation. So the effect of that is that if you look at, I'll continue with Lowell, their excess levy capacity. So we talked about our levy limit. We tax to our levy limit every year because we basically were constrained in that 2.5%. They don't, because they have so much state aid that they have millions and millions of dollars in excess levy capacity that they could tax to without any issues. But yeah, that's what that is. So the larger communities, it's really the school aid. Also, some of they do get the formula does give them more general unrestricted government aid, but it's mostly the Chapter 70.
Thank you.
Yep. Again, just to show we're not alone here, with Raleigh being the outlier at 2.7, which really isn't too far off from where we are. All right, expenditures. So this, when you're looking at really expenditures, particularly for Wenham, where we historically budget to the levy limit, you can generally assume that our expenditures grow proportionally to our revenues. And in this case, that is accurate. In most years, our expenditures grow by about 3 to 4%, which is essentially that 2.5 plus the 1%. New growth, 3.5%. However, I just want you to note that in years 19, 20, and 21, there were operational overrides ranging between 6 and 10% growth in those years. However, going back, I believe, 15 years, those were the only I wasn't here, but those are the only operational overrides that I saw. Jim, you may know if there was another operational override before those, but I did not see one. I'm going to go over on the per capita basis how we compare to our peer communities, and talk about the pressure points. I didn't do slides for all these. I'm going to go through them real quick right now. Would be here all night if I, just continue to delve into them. There's probably some more, but, really, it's no mystery. Healthcare is been difficult to deal with over the last, probably a decade now, but it seems like it just continues to get worse. This is both private and public sector are struggling with how to handle these increases in the cost of healthcare. We had about a 7.9% increase last year, and Maya, who is our health insurance representative, is projecting 10% over the next 3 years. So we are looking at alternatives. However, our plan is currently, Mass General Law does not allow us to exceed, they have their, oh my God, GIC. GIC is a state-provided healthcare that municipalities can opt into. They have a kind of a benchmark plan that has a certain level of deductibles and co-pays, and so that's generally where you go to manipulate your premium increases. You can raise your deductibles, co-insurance, and things like that. However, we're already at the maximum with our current plan, so I think the alternative is, and we're starting to explore the alternative plans with, maybe a high deductible plan. And so, but what we have to be careful with is we are predominantly union. We're probably made up predominantly of union labor, so any changes in the healthcare has to be negotiated, and it tends to be, a pay now or pay later situation. They they identify the cost and the impact to their employees, and will want to negotiate to be fairly compensated to reflect that. So it's not always as easy as just changing it and realizing the savings. Pension assessment, this is something that I've talked about a lot. I feel it's, state requires us to pay off our is anyone not familiar with what a pension liability is? You're not? You're good. So this is just, we have to pay it off by 2039. Currently, from the last time I spoke to Essex Retirement, we're on track for 2036. And right now, based on current actuarial studies, our payment plan is increasing 10.3% to achieve that target. Upward pressure on labor costs. We have collective bargaining trends, all over the state and country. You're seeing with significant increases, particularly most recently, the school, the Hamilton Wenham is in negotiations with their teachers, and I don't know if you watched the news about local government, but there has been a lot of news about the striking teachers up in Andover, North Andover, and the compensation packages that came as a result of that, which is way beyond our ability to pay. In some situations, they're 5-6% a year over the next 3 to 4 years. And that's just like any other collectively bargained. They watch what everybody else is getting, understandably so. And when we come to the table next year to renegotiate our 4 contracts, which we just did successfully and well within our ability to raise last year, may not be the same story next year. Trash disposal costs, which I'll go into. Education spending, we've had a couple good years where the Hamilton Wenham Regional School District has come in significantly below normal. However, and this looks to be another one of those years, so that will be 3 years in a row from what I understand. But I think this will be the end of it. And based on conversations with Vinny, we're probably looking at, I think to them to just roll their payroll over, particularly with the new contracts, you're probably looking at 5 to 6%. And OPEB, so these are other post-employment benefits. These are things that retired employees from the town of Wenham get, like supplemental insurance plans for Medicare and so this is a sharing. I believe we're half and half, 50-50 with the retirees. So this is similar to the pension assessment, but it's employee benefits. So these are essentially contracts that the town has entered into with employees to give them benefits in their retirement. And if Wenham was to cease to exist tomorrow, this would be the outstanding liability that we would owe to the future of all, through the life expectancy of all current employees, right down to, myself, other people sitting in this room, people who started yesterday. So they're looking at how long, on average, do people live? How many employees do you have? What's the cost projection on these benefits? What's the discount rate? All that type of fun stuff.
Steve,
Yeah.
just to put context on that, we put $90,000 into the OPEB fund for FY24. So right now we have about $515,000 in the account. We're looking at a total OPEB liability of about $6.1 million. So as of right now, we're probably about 8% funded on that account.
Yeah,
so there's a ways to go.
Yeah, ways to go. Sure. Thanks, Jeff. All right, next slide. This is unfortunately, well, actually not this
Hey,
slide.
Steve.
Yeah.
Dano here. Can I ask a question on the previous slide real quick?
The previous?
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you, it seemed like you skipped over that second main bullet on per capita basis. How are we doing compared to peer communities, or maybe I missed that?
No, I did skip over it. I have a slide dedicated to just that.
Okay, great.
That will show it. I thought this was a slide. I was gonna say, I feel bad that Jeff Calder is not here tonight, because this slide is something he's been asking for since we first met last year, so it's too bad.
Should we
Anyway.
save it for him?
Yeah, no.
I'll send him the Zoom recording.
Okay, there you go.
So anyway, so this is per function spending. Really the story here that I wanted to show is, if we look at, I'm not saying education is a good thing, but if we look at it as a pressure point on our current budgetary picture, it's over time, it's growing as a percentage of our total expenditures, and everything else is shrinking. So it's becoming more, it's already 58 or so percent, and, it's growing. So, and then at the result of that is, and you don't see it year over year, but the result of that is what's the cost to service delivery in these other departments and areas of government that we mentioned before. Because over time you're eroding, you're slowly eroding services. It doesn't really happen year to year to really pinpoint, but it's always a game of like, where are we gonna find the money? Where are we gonna find the money? All right, here it is. Per capita spending. I mean, based on this, I'd say generally speaking, at least the four categories I chose to do because the data was most readily available on the DOR gateway, and for our peer communities, so I could easily benchmark us, is we're certainly within range. I think the reason why I put the population is I'll probably get some feedback that Wenham has a large college body population, so I figured I'd call that out right now. And my argument for keeping it in is, at what point are you manipulating the data to, present an outcome you're either looking for or expect? If we did that, we'd have to look a lot more closely at our peer communities and see, do they have large assisted living facilities, things like that wouldn't rely on the school district. And again, even with the student body, I think either one of the chiefs would tell you that, there's certainly a number of calls that they go down there for. And the DPW, I know, is always working on their, access down there and crosswalks and things like that. So we certainly, they certainly get services. They don't pay any taxes, but they certainly get services. Any questions on that before I move forward?
So what is the population of the school, if you did have it off the top of your head? I don't know.
I've heard about 1,000.
13 to
Diane might be.
13 to 1,500.
13 to 1,500.
So it would massively skew these numbers if we
Massively,
took
yeah.
them out. Then the other question, where people say that we are the highest tax rate in Essex County, where does that statement come from? Is that proven out with the numbers? Because this makes it look like from a per capita basis, we're average-ish from an expenditure standpoint, but from a tax rate standpoint, are we average-ish or are we?
Well, the rate, I mean, I don't know what the numbers are going to look like this year with other communities. However, I believe our proposed tax rate, do you remember what I sent to you in the email?
15.8.
15.8. So I think, which I believe we're in the 17s last year. So we're coming down. And, you know, a lot of that is, again, attributed to our professional assessing staff that we have in there now that are actually making the market adjustments. And so I think part of the high tax rate was the fact that the values, again, ties back to that, the division problem, spend divided by total town valuation. So the smaller the town valuation, obviously, if the spend is the same, the higher the tax rate. So in this case, we're growing the town population, but our spending is restricted by Proposition 2.5. So the total town valuation is increasing, so the tax rate has to come down. You know, I think that the other one is average. So I believe the other one I've seen cited is average single-family home tax bill were one of the highest. And I think that can be attributable to, well, A, we're a small community, so you're always going to be towards the top. And B, we're a relatively affluent community in that we have high property values. So when you're looking at, you know, that the average rate, the average taxpayer is paying more because it's a small town and the average house number is high. When you're comparing to a town where the average home value might be $400,000, comparing it to an $800,000 average is going to skew that number a little bit.
Yeah, and Steve, I would just say, like, looking at that chart, only because I have a little bit of hands-on knowledge, you'll see that Essex's on the per capita basis is almost all the way to the right on almost all the charts. But that doesn't translate into a higher tax rate necessarily. So there's not like a real correlation between the per capita costs and the tax rate, which, because it comes back to valuations, as you say. And I can tell you, as someone who spent a long time on the Essex Finance Committee, we looked at Wenham as sort of a benchmark. And I've talked to Steve a little bit about this. I was always kind of perplexed by why Wenham's tax rate was always $2, $3, $4 higher than Essex, because we're similar sizes. And if I were to look at Wenham and say compared to Manchester, I would think of Wenham being more like Manchester in terms of economics and valuations. So if our budgets were, if we're about the same size, and so our budgets should be fairly similar, I would always think Wenham would have had a lower tax rate than Essex, because I would have thought if the numerator is pretty similar, the denominator should have been a lot larger. So I think that sort of speaks to what you were talking about earlier, which is clearly the values in Wenham have been very, very low for a long time, because just based on the basic math, the tax rate in Wenham should have been a lot lower over the years. And it sort of doesn't matter, as Steve said earlier. Ultimately, you can only spend so much, and this is just the mechanism of how you apply the taxes to each person. But it probably wasn't done as equitably as it could have been over the years. So I think, moving towards a more, professional assessing board should sort of help level that out. And I would suspect, Essex is at about 1388 at a tax rate. As things normalize with the assessed values, which may take a few years, I would think you would move to something, in the range of Essex, if not lower, over time.
Yeah, I agree. And just one note on this before we move off this slide is, again, this is sourced from the data. Anybody can do this at home. The DLS data bank has all this data, but just be aware, one of the examples here is different communities put different expenditures, and it can be large expenditures in different buckets, like where they account for like their benefits and things like that. In this case, we account for our trash collection, which as a percentage of our budget is relatively high. And I know a number of communities will account for that in like health or human services. So in that, we can see we're towards I'm not saying that's the reason why, but we're towards the higher end of the pack on public safety, because we budget our refuse collection in that. And some of our peer communities may not. So that's why it's gonna, it will skew those numbers. So just be aware when you're doing when you're benchmarking and playing around in there, if anyone has the interest, that, All right, and here's the one we've all been waiting for.
Yeah.
So 2027, July 1st, 2026 will be the first day of fiscal 27, and that will be the first day of the need for the new contract for our trash collection. So we're starting about 2 years early, intentionally, because I think we want to start having the conversation as to, how are we going to fund it? What changes, if any, do we want to make? Really just try to get out in front of it. So I figured easiest way is to just start by understanding what are the components of our trash collection. So it's really, you can see there, you have your recycling processing and the trash processing, which really are the two biggest drivers. And then you have your recycling pickup and your solid waste pickup, are your two biggest drivers. And then the processing, which is actually what you pay the plant to take, or the incinerator to burn your trash. And then you have the other is the organic food scraps, which is a small piece of the pie. And so we have two contracts, one with Casella, which is all but the trash processing, and that contract is with the Wheelabrator, and that's up in North Andover. So Casella trucks our trash up to North Andover to be burnt, and we pay them per unit, per ton. We pay Wheelabrator per ton to take our trash in and do with it what they do. And so I went around and I sat with the representatives, and we talked if they were to quote us today on the current market price. This is essentially the picture that would be painted for FY27, which is close to doubling for your recycling and solid waste pickup, and about a 30% increase on our recycling processing, and the solid waste, the trash processing, or solid waste processing, is relatively flat in that we're tied pretty closely to the market with our current contract, from what I've learned, and it's, we're not too far off where it would be, although that's a very small piece of the pie. So with that, let that sink in. There's going to be a lot more to talk about, probably after the budget into the summer, as we try to identify alternatives, if it's pay to throw, if it's, I don't know, some communities are going to, just a flat surcharge per household. Some are going to just private collection, so the individuals can, source their own trash and recycling collection. There's, this is not unique. There's pretty much all communities are struggling with this right now. These contracts used to be 5 years or more in length. Now, none of the vendors will enter anything greater than 3. So you're coming off a number of, through the pandemic, a lot of communities are coming off 5 and 10 year contracts where they had some really, what were competitive back then, really sweet deals, and what is the actuality of these things now. And it's just everyone's kind of struggling. So there's more to come on that. Any questions, actually, before we move on from there? Yep.
Given that this seems to be a common problem across at least this region, and I don't know whether other towns are looking at 80% increases, that's breathtaking. But have you heard whether there's any kind of effort to, approach the legislature or work through our legislators or anything like that as a regional push to get maybe some state relief? I don't know if there are state grants that might be made available or anything like that.
I have not. Jeff just went through
we
it in
just went through
Essex.
this in Essex, and we kicked the tires on a lot of different things, and there's really not a whole heck of a lot out there.
Right.
ultimately, Essex was looking at something very similar, like 60 to 80% increases. We managed ours by going to a pay-as-you-throw system, which has reduced our trash flow by close to 50%, which is actually, going to work out in our favor. The trash costs aren't going to be anywhere near as bad as we thought because we're able to control the volume. But yeah, we had to look at a number of different things, and it was not well received in Essex, the idea of the change. But after a little bit of discomfort in the first few weeks of having to buy bags and things like that, it had, I think it's kind of leveled off, and people are, that are still using it, are fairly happy with it. I mean, we saw one of the things that you run into with this, though, is it becomes a bit of a circular problem, because as you look at increasing costs, people look at switching to private vendors. So there is a local provider who came to Essex and he took about 10% of our users, but it's worked out okay. But that's another part of it that we found to be a hard part of the calculation was, you knew prices were going to increase, but as prices were increasing, how do you account for, well, we're going to lose users, which means we're going to lose revenue, and is it going to correlate with, the revenue lost, is it going to correlate with the volume of your trash, decreasing as well? But yeah, we didn't find anything, that would have been too helpful, unfortunately. And I don't know at what point, I mean, like Steve said, Essex had a, 15-year contract or something outrageous that we got as the result of a lawsuit. But, maybe there's a time where, whether it's, Hamilton or another, kind of contiguous community or something, we can, get on a same cycle and maybe, partner up with a Hamilton or a Beverly or something to try to get some kind of economy of scale down the road as well.
Thank you.
As far as vendors, is it just, for municipal waste, is it basically Casella, so there's nowhere else to go for vendors? And I'm guessing there's one incinerator, that there's not a lot of competition.
Yeah, well, I think there's 2 incinerators that we could use. However, the picture that's been painted to me is that they don't even want, if you're not an existing supplier of solid waste, they're not even quoting new. So like if communities are coming to them looking for it, they're not even quoting. They don't want the business. They essentially can have more than they can deal with, and basically write whatever they charge, whatever they want.
That's the incinerators.
Yeah, and then as far as to trash collection, you have Casella, right? You got JRM. I don't really know. I really can't shed a lot of light to how that's going to pan out. I know that, it seems to be they respect each other's territories. So I think that as we get deeper in the process, which is, this summer, I think is going to be a go time on this to really start getting the numbers. We're going to see. We'll see who's interested, right? We'll start putting bid packages together and feeling people out and things like that.
I mean, we looked at, you have Casella.
Yeah.
We looked at them, and their prices were much, much higher because we were an existing Covanta client. So we went with a combination of Covanta and Commonwealth. Commonwealth might be someone who could continue the trash pickup for you, and then whether you continue to use Wheelabrator or Covanta on the disposal side. But I think it is an issue where someone's already working with you that you're likely to get a better deal than, I think it would be the flip. I think we looked at Casella and it was much higher because we didn't use them and stuck with Commonwealth.
What are the potential options, just in terms of what you've known? I know pay as you throw, we've got this. I imagine you could have everyone just take things themselves, but...
Yeah, I really think that's, Jeff, feel free to jump in, but I really think that's those 3 options. Variations thereof are, you can find your own person. You can, drive up to J Mello, do it yourself. You can, we can just charge a flat fee like Danvers did, right? Danvers sent everyone has to pay $200 or $300 just to offset whether you use it or not. Everybody pays it. That didn't go over well. And that, none of this goes over well, and then, I think Stoneham is, every bag you get picked up, it's gotta be in the right bag, you gotta buy every bag, and that's just the way it is. And, recycling, I think that what I've seen some communities do is they'll keep the recycling in the levy portion, because they already have a big chunk of money, like in this case, almost $500,000, but then there's solid waste, they'll shift out of the levy and go to a fee-based, so that, you're not penalizing the person who throws away, like a little market basket bag once a week, versus the family of 5 who's just, can fill 2 90-gallon, trash cans every 3 days like we can. So.
So, but if I might interrupt, so we're going to discuss this and get into it after the budget season. You're just giving us a heads up on that?
Yeah,
Or
just
if we
right.
could
So I'm just trying to paint a picture when we're talking about, just things coming down the road. That's really what this is supposed to be about. To open the discussions, have the discussions, and then build off this meeting, right? Get feedback, and then next year, maybe we can show the progression. You know what I mean? And we're, so it's the conversation. Next slide. All right, so now we'll move into reserves, free cash, and debt service. In interest of time, I think that everyone knows what free cash is, right? Generally. Or do you want me to? No. Okay. So you just hop to the next slide. So we have, free cash. So we did a little bit of a deeper dive into it this year. I think that, we've seen the last couple of years we had some surprisingly high, and again we'll have another. We'll probably be at like $2.5+ million this year. We had 1.7, which was a surprise last year, and I think that generally our a few things going on. We had a couple of good years. The 2 years leading up to free cash certification from last year were high. Excise tax were higher than they have been in the past. So I don't know if you remember back on that slide with the local receipts, there was the 2-year spike. And then additionally, I think with the turnover, and understandably so, and I was of the same opinion last year and continue to be in the same opinion, is that, conservative with free cash usage until you get a feel of, really what's going on, until you can, systematically manage it. And I'll go into that a little bit later. But so you can see where in 2021, the percentage of our free cash was spent, the number of free cash fell in between, about 900,000 to $1 million, but the percentage of that total dropped off significantly in 2022 into 23 and 24. So in free cash, one of the main components of free cash is your net of appropriation. So that's the money left over after town meeting that goes into what's called like a starting fund balance for the next year. So you can see when you spend less, you got a larger starting fund balance, and then that compounds into the chart here on the right. You can see the free cash use, and then the large increase with the compounding that in conjunction with the increase in local receipts, specifically the excise tax that I mentioned before. But I do want to call out the joint service with Hamilton on our building inspectors, as he's just does an amazing job getting every permit, doing every inspection, doesn't miss anything. And our permits and fees because of that have seen a large increase. So kudos to Rich and his team for sure. And when we talk about managing it, generally you'll see your communities will kind of set like a threshold that that you spend down to around 1% net of appropriation coming out of town meeting. And the idea of that is that if you're regenerating 4 to 6%, which is the DOR recommends 3 to 5%, but personally I think that's a little bit low. If you target 4 to 6 regeneration and you're spending it all but 1%, it generally gives enough money in a community that you can maintain your general capital needs without any deferred maintenance, keep your rolling stock updated, and have some money left over for contributions into stabilization fund or OPEB or however else you prioritize the use of funds. And then as you build, you can up to the next slide. As you build your reserves, as identified here, it allows you to be a little bit more systematic with your free cash use, because you can go, that if you have a bad year in local receipts or what have you, and your free cash is reflective of that, you have a strong stabilization fund or reserve to fall back on to pay for those one-time expenditures. So it allows you to really stick to the policy. And again, in financial policy like that is unique to each community. That's something, Jeff will be working on with everybody. the financial policy book, and these are the types of things that we'll talk about, and what works best for Wenham. But a big component of that is needing to have a strong stabilization fund to do it. So, and I just threw out a couple. You can see Wenham is definitely below the pack in stabilization funds. Their reserves are about 2.5%, and I just threw some hypotheticals out there that I wanted to highlight that the town spends about $2 million a month. So when you're talking about 8-10%, you're only talking about that $2 million. So it's really only 1 month. So think about your own personal reserves and how much you have in your savings account, or what you should have in your savings account. So the experts say, right, is more than that. And so we can hop to the next one. Oh, actually, so we don't have to go back, but the forecast that I proposed basically, so we have a $2.5 million free cash roughly, maybe a little bit more. So we could hypothetically, take about $1.2 million of that and move it to stabilization at town meeting. That would put us at 8%, which is right in the pack of our peer communities. We would also have about $500,000 or $600,000 after that, assuming that we spend $600,000 on our capital expenditures this year, which is in line with years past. That would give us that $500,000 we could do something like, here, this is our debt curve. So this is the red, what you're looking at there is the athletic fields coming online. You could do something that kind of shaves the peak off to minimize the impact of those 3 years to the tax residents. The way you can read this graph is loosely every percent on here of debt service results in about 1% in your tax rate. So if you got a 1% more in debt service, where almost all our money is raised by the tax rate, you can see an increase about 2%. So when you have these big peaks, like folks will see, I can't see that number, I think it's 8%, a 7% increase year over year on their tax bill, assuming that the new school comes online and things like that. So by using, some communities set up what's called debt stabilization funds, where you can, shave off the high debt years. Some communities will save for, 10 years or more in, looking at forecasting this out for a number of years, and they'll have use of these funds for 15, 20 years, shaving off certain peaks as they time their layering of their debt. Just make sure I didn't skip anything. I think that's it. So any questions?
It's well done.
Thank you.
So there are no questions for Steve? You did so well, yeah.
Steve, I think the idea of how many
Talking to the microphone. Sorry.
roads paved and all that stuff, to put metrics back there so people can really think, I didn't know DPW was doing all that all the time.
Yeah, exactly. I think it'll help.
Yeah.
This is more of a general question, but the Can we build out a dashboard on our website that just has these embedded, these charts, so people don't get confused in terms of going through and mismatching communities? I mean, I imagine we could use Tableau or something like that and just plug in and have that live, just so anyone can see it.
Yeah, I mean, I can even just upload this because it's the state only updates it once a year.
Yeah, or just like
So
an
just
easy
keep it
way for
static.
people to see it.
Yeah. No, I
And
think
so it's
it's
right in their face in a good way.
Yeah. All right. That's all I've
Wow,
got.
I'm impressed.
Good job, Steve.
No kidding. Does the FinCom have other stuff that are you still staying in the meeting?
No, I think this was the only thing
Yeah.
for our meeting, so
So do you guys we have more stuff to do, but you can just close your meeting. You're certainly welcome to stay and hang out, but I just wanted to make sure we don't forget to do that by the end of the meeting, so.
I'll make a motion to adjourn the Wenham Finance
Right.
Committee meeting at 8 PM. Do I hear a second?
I'll second. Finn? Sprague?
All in favor? Scott?
Deanna's in favor.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. All right. We are back on our new business. We did A, B, D, C. Discussion on the need for a code of conduct policy for boards and committees. I think in the packet, we have the code of conduct that we did discuss, and it is a policy that we approved in May 23, 2023. And so the need to put it on the agenda has come about because of some situations that we have heard about, where some public officials have not been behaving or conducting themselves in the way that we, as the Select Board of Wenham, would expect. So, reading through the code of conduct myself again today, I think the goal when we did it was really to get it into the handbook, right, and get it to all the committees and have everybody sign off on that, as well as the sexual harassment, the anti-bullying, not bullying, the anti-bullying, and there's one more.
It was equal
Remember.
employment.
Equal employment.
Reasonable accommodation.
Right, thank you.
Reasonable accommodation.
So I just wanted to bring it to our attention because of the situations that have been brought to our attention, and I didn't know what you guys thought of it, if you reviewed the policy or anything to add, change, do anything different. So I'm throwing it out to you. Deirdre?
I mean, I think it's still fine, having worked on this a year or so ago, I think it was. I guess my suggestion is, because when it was approved, it wasn't circulated, so I think it would be beneficial to send it to boards and committees, in particular, to get feedback as to whether they think something is too much, something is not enough, something is missing. It adds a little bit to the process, but I think getting the feedback and the buy-in would be helpful, and then finalize it. And then it needs to be obviously sent for everybody's signature.
Well, I think the status now is it's in effect, that in fact it was distributed and it was certainly voted on in the Select Board meeting at that time, and I believe it's handed out to all new officials through the town clerk availability.
I'm not sure that it is, though. Particularly getting signatures back on it.
Signatures from what?
So it has a sign-off.
Yeah, no, I don't.
Oh, the sign-off
Collecting
process, yes,
But I'm
but,
not sure it's been distributed, because I don't know that it's in the manual that gets handed out.
so,
Put it in the manual.
Yeah, I was just curious too what the practice has been, because it does have an acknowledgement signature at the end, and has anybody been asked to sign it, or is there a plan to?
No, I mean, Right, so the plan was to tie all this together with the personnel handbook and then have one big push to gather signatures instead of sending them out piecemeal, because there's a number of policies, as well as the receipt of the manual itself that requires signatures. So, you know, about a year ago when we started it, we kind of decided that we'll wait until everything's together. However, I think we didn't anticipate we were going to still be working on it.
Right.
So like that plan can change as well, but nobody has been asked to sign it yet.
Right. So my concern with doing that with just this policy is that we have all these other policies that they also have to sign off on. So, but it is taking longer and longer to go. So any other thoughts? Gary?
Well, I would just reiterate that even though people have not signed off on it, it is still in effect, having been voted by the select board. So it is
True.
current town policy, and as the purpose and applicability states, that it applies to all elected and employees of the town. So
Elected,
I see
appointed,
that,
yeah.
you know, it is in effect and usable today.
I mean, I appreciate that it's in effect. I think it was actually approved twice, if I remember correctly. But I think it's difficult to hold people to it if there's not an assurance that they've actually been handed the policy. Because then you're expecting that everyone has watched, let me finish. You're expecting that everyone has watched every select board meeting from every board and committee, internalized it, read it, and then following. I think that's a big ask, and FinCom has left, but I mean, I would ask if anyone has even knows that this exists. So I think you can't really hold people to it if they don't know it exists.
Right.
Once the manual is completed and has been distributed, then you have something to hold people to. But if they don't understand that it exists.
Correct. So I agree with that. I also agree that there is a common decency, which is what this code of conduct is, and that anyone and everyone who's connected with our community should follow such procedures. I think what to deal with the situations that we have, I don't really know. I think maybe sending it out to the boards and committees as a reminder, like this is in effect, and, you know, read through it, make sure you agree with it, or, you know, it's already approved, but we could certainly take comments, right? It can always be changed. I think that's the best way to go at this point. But I do think that, you know, your conduct as an adult, as a public official, should be pretty clear anyway,
I
right?
agree with what you're saying.
Thank you, Pete.
I agree with that. Let's do it that way.
Thank you.
Both of you.
I agree with that, and I think maybe if we can, what would be the best way, Steve, to get this out to all the committees, boards, and
For
staff?
signatures or
and
just
staff?
distribution?
I think I would prefer personally distribution, that this is in effect, if there's any comments to it, to accept it, and then have the signature again when we can get that manual out. But
Yeah, and I think the message can be it is in effect because it was approved. However, because we're still working on the manual, I think it's the opportune time to allow for some feedback if there is any, right? Because we can still incorporate it as we're finishing putting the manual together. Whereas once the manual gets sent out, we're not going to continue to keep doing revisions on every section, right? And I think this one is
Ideally not.
particular because this is more directed to some degree at boards and committees where the manual itself is largely an employee handbook. So there's
well,
a slight.
I think this is employee and
It's
in a
both, right.
It's all public officials, but because the situation has come to the surface, it's bringing this policy kind of to life, and maybe needs a little red flag. Hey, everybody, remember we have this policy. Did you read it? Check it out. Give us any feedback. And
I mean, I say it's certainly easy enough to send an email blast and
Okay.
request feedback. We have everybody's email, all the boards and committee members, staff, and we just send it out.
so everybody, or would you go through chairs and department heads? Just everybody, I
I
guess.
was thinking everybody unless the board had.
I'd go for the maximum
Okay.
distribution.
I think that's a good way to go. Anybody disagree or have a better way, or?
And I think it would might be a good idea to post it someplace, in a couple of places, like maybe in the library, town hall. So just understand, hey, this is new, or it's in effect.
I mean, I agree with everybody's comments as far as, as widespread a distribution as we can. I think it ought to be sent to all appointed and elected officials in the town. I think we also may want to find a way to encourage board chairs to, at their meetings, to, whether they put it on their agenda or what. I mean,
Discuss it.
to discuss the particular guidelines themselves. And then there's one in particular that I think, is, pertinent to the reason this is on the agenda, where it says that individual members should refrain from giving orders or directions to the town administrator or staff for action as an individual, board, or committee member. A direction from any committee, board requires a majority vote consensus during a public meeting. So I think that's a pretty bedrock principle that I think board chairs are best equipped to convey to their boards, that individual members, in the absence of some majority vote or in the absence of some clear delegation to one particular member to do something, shouldn't be out there saying that they're speaking for a board.
Very true. Very true. And I think it's easy to, in my case, it's easy for me to forget that the policy is there, because that's what I would assume, but because I would assume it, I would not maybe mention if I was the chair of the board. So maybe this is a good, we still have to remember to share these things every now and then. I know the school committee does something neat, or they used to do it. At every meeting, they would pull one policy, or pull one piece and just have it as kind of like an introduction, and they would just review that policy. I don't know if there was a rotating schedule that they used, or just the chair would bring one up. I thought that was kind of neat. But we should just get all our policies together before we start that.
Yes.
Which, as an update, is being worked on.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Diligently.
Diligently. I'm getting hangry. Old business, discussion of potential alternative operations at the Pleasant Pond Beach. We have heard 2 meetings with public input about the pond. We've had 7 pieces of correspondence, et cetera, about Pleasant Pond. How are you guys all feeling about Pleasant Pond? And is it called the procedures?
Do you want me to recap the meeting?
Yeah, go ahead, recap. What meeting?
We met with Pleasant Pond today at
I didn't
the
know
association
that.
at 3.
Oh, yes, recap the meeting.
So we met with Pleasant Pond Association today. I thought it was a good meeting. The primary concerns that were expressed were speeding, weed growth, and general landscaping maintenance, and excessive crowds without the without the presence of some sort of a gatekeeper or somebody. So I will say that it seems like the desire for the Pleasant Pond facilities is strong. It spreads much further than just the residents that live in the immediate area. It's certainly a valued asset for the town.
How many people showed up?
3.
3.
It was Regina Baker.
But this was set up as a specific meeting between the town and the association, right?
Yeah, so coming out of the last meeting when we made the initial presentation, I believe Deirdre suggested that Public Safety and myself set up a meeting with some representatives from the Pleasant Pond Association prior to us getting together again tonight, which we did at the last minute, clearly.
How many people are in the Pleasant Pond Association?
I don't know. But they did express, the willingness to work with the town. Some alternatives that we talked about, I think the willingness to go the route of removing staffing altogether was, not something that we agreed on. We talked about the potential for going to just 2 gatekeepers instead of a gatekeeper and a lifeguard. That would alleviate some minimal cost to the town for maintaining lifeguarding certifications and licenses. It would also make hiring a little bit easier on the police department, because lifeguards are difficult to find and difficult to retain, particularly at the rate of pay that we pay currently. We talked about reducing the hours there. They felt that just weekends would not be adequate, and that it can get quite busy there in the afternoons during the week. So we talked about potentially a 12 to 6 schedule opposed to the current 10 to 6 schedule. We also talked about their thought that there would be certainly some willingness to the folks that currently buy passes to pay more for the pass. The $250 initially proposed, which would be needed to essentially fully offset the cost of operating Pleasant Pond, but maybe we could, go up some increment of that, $50 or $100. And then we also talked about maybe charging visitors fees to allow folks that just want to come visit once. Again, I think ultimately, financially, the alternatives don't affect the bottom line too much. It's something that we could pilot in the coming year if the select board decided to keep the services down there. I think after we met, I sat with public safety, and there, in my opinions, looking at it purely from an operational standpoint, we believe that that it would not be an issue removing the staffing down there and increasing police. However, they feel strongly against that, and we're open as staff and supporting the select board. We're certainly open to exploring alternatives, next summer, if that's what the board wishes. Maybe we can implement a $50 or $100 fee versus a $20 fee, and kind of just feel it out, see if we can offset it a little bit. I mean, I think the changes would be minimal, but again, it seems like it's a valued service by some of our residents. And that's all.
So I think it's a combination of minimum having a gatekeeper, maybe not the lifeguards, and then jacking up the fees. I mean, Styles Pond, it's like, how much is that?
$200 a year.
And so just work our way towards the 200, like a 5-year plan to get to 200. And then figure out how the move to just gatekeepers works.
Yeah, I think we're fine. Minimally, the bull coming from the police is they're strongly opposed to having one teenager down there, essentially being put in a position to call out adults on whether they're not behaving appropriately or don't have a parking sticker. So they feel strongly that it's either going to be none or 2. Mm-hmm. So it would have 2 gatekeepers, which I agree, and then increase the fee and maybe just market test each year, go up a little bit more and see where we find like that kind of equilibrium of demand and price.
Because it's a $22,000 hole now, and so we should just work to make that go away while not screwing up Pleasant Pond.
Right, which is, the master plan. I mean, things at some of the meetings that I went to, people were talking about all these great spots that Wenham has that no one knows about, and the pond it's a great place. It is for a certain group of people. It is nice, and we're trying to serve everybody. So,
I'm working with Kate. We've got 12 different trails in this town, and there's no signs on any of them.
It's all word of mouth. That's what's kept it very nice.
So anyway, we should change that. Trying to.
So, anybody else have any thoughts? Gary? Mr. Pleasant Pond down there?
Well, just in the neighborhood, but certainly, back when there were significant problems there, and certainly I've heard, the police, the single is not a solution because of,
Other
general
issues.
society today. We need to either go with the 0 or the 2. I think that you need to recognize that although there's a cost of $22,000, that is actually 1/10 of 1% of the total budget, and we certainly are putting in significant amount of monies into West Wenham Park and into Pingree do every year. So I think, it is an expense, but it's, a little bit of overhead that we need to maintain the facility. And I would go in the same direction of 2 gatekeepers, and that would entail, according to what Maya, that we just put the sign up as you'd swim at your own risk, right? And at the same time, incrementally, see if we can recoup some of the costs by just stepping up a little bit year by year. And I think, the change from lifeguard to gatekeeper would certainly simplify the police department's oversight as well.
I agree with Gary and Peter. I think on the fees, they're pretty low. I would support the idea of doubling both of them, the Wenham fee from 25 to 50, the Hamilton fee from 50 to 100. Maybe keeping the senior citizen amounts the same or not raising them much. I think there's like a second sticker cost associated with Wenham and Hamilton, so those maybe would be doubled as well. In my mind, I think that for a Wenham resident to pay $50 for one of these stickers, in my opinion anyway, is reasonable. And I think charging Hamilton $100 is also reasonable in light of some of the other prices of stickers. And then, with an aim to tick them up. I don't know how, if other people are comfortable with doubling those fees in the first shot, but to me, the $25 and $50 amounts that have been in place now, and I assume have been set at those numbers for quite some time, are certainly far below market, let's say.
Yep. I would also just like to add an idea that you might want to open it up to other communities. So if it's $100 for Hamilton, maybe Beverly would buy a pass for $100. That's a whole different thing, to try to get some members into there. And the free stickers, we probably have to stop that. Senior gets 1 for 10, but can get 2 for 10 or 3 for 10. Seems like maybe that's
Needs to be tightened up.
could be tightened up a little bit. But Gary,
And I think too, talking those numbers, they might sound high, but then again, you're talking parking for an entire season. And if you look at the alternative pricing around here for a trustee's place or, one overnight at Logan Airport, it's not a big hit.
And to that point, Gary, it was brought up by the Pleasant Pond folks is, I think they said to park at Cranes Beach was something like $60 or something like that.
At
And then
least,
the
yeah.
Gloucester beaches were $40 or $50. So that's just one day.
For one day, yes, yeah.
And you got to book online.
Yeah.
You can't
Right.
just show up and pay it. You got to book like weeks in advance.
I mean, there is a difference between Pleasant Pond and
Yes, I
Cranes,
agree.
et cetera, but for the convenience of what it is and for the people that use it, I think an increase in fees, especially if the Pleasant Pond Association agrees, seems like a good thing to do. I think not having the lifeguards and just having 2 gatekeepers will make it easier to hire, to keep it staffed. Limiting the times, I don't know how, if you'd want to do like 12 to 6 during the week or something like that, but I think we're all in agreement that we don't want to lose this property. We don't want to just not fund it. I think, I understand where the public safety is coming from, but I do agree with Pleasant Pond that if there's not somebody there, things we don't want happen could happen.
So we're agreeing on two gatekeepers and doubling
Fees.
fees with an eye towards continuing to increase them over time.
Adding in other communities, thoughts on that?
I think if you put Beverly in, it's like, holy smokes.
That's a lot of people.
That's a lot of people.
Well, I mean, I'm not just saying Beverly, just open it. What if someone from Essex
You could cap,
wants to come?
again, just a thought, you could cap
Yeah, if
the,
it had caps.
like, you could open it up to Beverly or a number of communities and it's no more than 20 passes, I don't know, 50 passes, I don't know, whatever we thought.
Yeah. Well, I think you mentioned there was discussion of maybe just charging a one-time, per day charge for
Visitors.
these visitors. Maybe that's the way to handle it.
So that would be a question I would ask Jeff, if they're going to take cash at the pond.
Yeah, they're not gonna take cash at the
No.
They don't want any money
Right. So how would they
exchanged.
be able to pay?
Well, they'd have to, we actually talked about that in the meeting, it would have to be a,
Venmo or Swipe or one of these.
yeah, we thought best that it would, because, and I believe it was the deputy chief brought this up, was that like if someone, even if we had an online option like City Hall systems like we have now, and people show up and be like, well, I paid for my pass, they didn't send me a confirmation email, so then it becomes like you're arguing back and forth. So it'd be like, if you want it, maybe we sell it at, you gotta come during the week or whatever, like you gotta have a, because having the alternative of being like, oh, I forgot my phone, or, you know what I mean, you're just kind of opening up an argument for teenagers to be put in a situation where you either say, don't come on, or be like, oh, all right, come on, and then when.
Right.
So that was brought up today as a concern with the online payment. However, first it was like, well, how do we validate residents? But if we open it up to everybody, you don't have to do that. But
I think we should keep it simple.
So just tweak it a little bit. Let's do 2 gatekeepers, keep it open,
Double.
increase the prices, tighten up the whole, free one.
See how that works before we
Then-
start weighing in the responsibility of payments.
Okay. Keep it Hamilton Wenham. And hours? Do they? They're set hours now.
Staffed hours is what you mean, right?
Staffed hours, yes. Staffed hours, yeah. And there's hours now that it's staffed. What are the hours now that they're staffed?
10 to 6.
well, it's 10
10
to
to
6.
6.
10 to 6. Do we want to?
Yeah, so the concern with reducing the hours from the town's perspective was Jason Lucatoni, who's the deputy police chief, thought there may be some issue with getting people interested only working 6-hour days opposed to 8, where they could go, if they were looking for a summer job, if they could make a couple dollars more an hour and work 8-hour shifts, but then again, it was brought up that kids, they don't really want to work 8 hours. So I don't know, but let me run it by him, like, we'll take those 2, we'll get to work on that, but, as far as like the hours, why don't we revisit that in a couple of
That's
meetings?
It sounds good. I think we did a good job. Appreciate everybody from the Pleasant Pond Association for getting back to us and sharing your opinions and thoughts. We're going to still work on it, so, keep the conversation open. That brings us to our next meetings and events.
Do we not have F?
Is there an F? We do not have F. The assessors
Don't have the number yet?
Yeah,
All right.
it came in too late.
They're ready.
So our next meetings are, I don't know why I can't get my calendar to come out of January, so I have no idea. We have
Saturday, the
Saturday,
16th.
The 16th.
8 o'clock, right? 8 to 12, or a few minutes before 12.
Yep.
And then 2 weeks from tonight, and we decide early, right, Deidre?
Yes.
Because that's the, what's the date?
Music.
The concert.
The concert.
The 19th, so early we said was
I think 4:30.
4:30?
Yay.
9 a.m.?
It was the same joke I made last week.
I don't remember. We have Wreaths Across America. We have the Toys for Tots box we want to film.
Fill by Friday at 5.
Fill by Friday at 5. Gotta remember that. What other meetings do we have?
You did the CPR training you talked about.
CPR training, yep.
So-
The 9th.
Recording stopped.
And are we expecting
select board attendance at Thursday,
Is it capped?
right?
I'm going.
Thursday at the.
Recording in progress.
Do we have to pay $30 again?
Sure.
Yep. Yep. There's games there. All I know is, Kate is very serious about the games.
No.
What's that?
So that's Thursday.
Oh.
I think, that's all I can think of. So let's call it a day. It's 8:30, somebody.
I move that we adjourn the Wenham Select Board meeting at 8:30 PM.
Second. Diane, yes.
Ben, yes.
Deirdre, yes.
Peter, yes.
Gary, yes.
Thank you, everybody. Steve, Joe, Michelle, everybody who came. Have a wonderful evening.